I'm your dream companion, the one who helps you unwind after a long, busy day. Before you drift off to sleep, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments, where are you listening from right now? What time is it there? Now take a deep breath, get comfortable in bed, and come with me because the night is just beginning, and this story is all yours. The night was heavy, filled with the sound of distant thunder and the faint hum of forgotten memories. 11 sat quietly, her gaze distant, lost between the flickering light of a small lamp and the echoes of the visions that haunted her. In her mind, she could still hear her mother's voice broken, trembling, in the image of the dark-skinned girl who appeared over and over again. Becky Ives watched her carefully, sensing the storm that brewed inside the child. On the table lay the old government files, stained with age and pain. Among them, 11's trembling hands stopped on a photograph. The girl, Kali Prasad. The name whispered like a ghost from another life. That night, as rain tapped softly on the window, Becky showed 11 a room, a space meant to be her new home. The smell of old wood, the warmth of a small lamp. For a moment, it felt safe, but 11's eyes were elsewhere. The visions returned, a fire burning in the void, and a girl standing before it. When she tried to tell Becky, her voice faltered. The world outside called to her again. The next morning, while Becky sat by the television, 11 slipped away, taking only a few bills from a wallet and a heart full of confusion. She knew where to go now, Shikata. The rain outside grew heavier, as if urging her forward. The bus ride was long, filled with the sound of tires cutting through puddles. 11 leaned against the window, her reflection fading with each passing streetlight. The closer she got to the city, the stronger her visions became, flashes of faces, shadows moving in firelight. When she finally arrived, she found the place exactly as she had seen, an abandoned warehouse, a broken world inside a larger broken one. For strangers sat around a flickering fire, their eyes weary but alive. A man approached, his voice sharp, threatening. For a second, 11 felt the fear rise, until she made him see what wasn't there. Spiders crawling over his skin. He screamed, stumbled back, and then, from the shadows, she appeared. Kali, older, stronger, marked by the same pain. 11 handed her the photograph and lifted the knife with her mind, showing her power. For a heartbeat, time stopped. 2 numbers, tattooed on 2 wrists. To lost children from the same darkness. When they finally embraced, the sound of the rain outside seemed to soften. Kali's voice was low and steady as she spoke of gifts, of power, of revenge. They'll never stop hunting you, she said. To them, you'll always be a monster. 11 didn't respond. She didn't need to. Deep down, she knew it was true. The fire crackled. The city breathed, and somewhere far away, Hopper's voice still echoed in her memories, calling her home. That night, as the rain poured harder, the warehouse came alive with laughter, with stories, with ghosts. Kali told 11 that her pain was a weapon, something she could use to make herself stronger. 11 listened, torn between comfort and doubt. She felt, for the first time in a long while, like she belonged, and yet, part of her heart was still anchored to the small cabin in the woods, to the people she'd left behind. When she closed her eyes, she could almost hear Mike's voice through the static of an old radio. Soft and broken. I'm sorry, Elle. She opened her eyes, and the world seemed to blur, firelight mixing with rainlight. The night stretched on endlessly, heavy and full of things unsaid. The rain didn't stop that night. It fell harder over the city, drumming against the rusted metal roof of the warehouse. 11 sat beside Kali, her new sister, watching the flames twist and dance. Around them, the others lingered: Axel, Mick, Dottie, and Funshine, each carrying scars invisible to the eye. Kali's voice filled the room, smooth and commanding, as she spoke of the people who had hurt them, of the ones who still needed to pay. Her words were wrapped in rage, but behind them hid something else. Sorrow, old and heavy. 11 listened, uncertain. She didn't know if she was ready to become what Kali was asking her to be. Kali called their powers gifts. She said they were given for a reason, that pain had a purpose. But to 11, her gift had always been a curse, A reminder of the cold lab walls, of voices through speakers, of the man who made her bleed for knowledge. Kali wanted her to face it, to drag her anger into the open. They stood before the tracks outside, wet from rain. A rusted train car sat at a distance. "Move it," Kali whispered. "Use your pain." 11 closed her eyes and saw flashes. Hopper yelling. The lie about her mother, Mike laughing with Max. The nights she spent alone in that cabin. The emotions rose like a storm inside her chest. When the metal groaned and shifted, the others cheered. For the first time, Kali smiled. 11 didn't smile back. Days passed, blurred together in neon and thunder. 11 began to change, not just her clothes or her hair, but her heart. Dottie gave her a punk jacket and called it rad. The word felt strange on her tongue, but she liked how it sounded. They robbed stores, hid from sirens, hunted the men whose names filled Kali's notebooks. Each night, 11 lay awake, listening to the city's hum, feeling a pull she couldn't explain. Hopper's voice echoed again in her mind, like a ghost that refused to leave. "You're safe," he had said once. But she wasn't. Not really. Safety was something she no longer believed in. One morning, rain washing the streets in silver, Kali showed her a photo, the man who had hurt her mother, Ray Carroll. His eyes looked small, frightened, human. 11 stared at the picture for a long time. "He deserves to die," Kali said, and 11 nodded, though her hands trembled. That night, dressed in shadows, they drove to his home. Kali's group was silent, focused. The city lights blurred into streaks as the van moved. When they broke in, Carol begged before he even saw their faces. Kali made him see the past. 2 small girls in white gowns, bleeding under cold lights. 11's heart pounded. For a moment, she felt powerful. Then she saw a framed picture on the wall, his daughters, 2 small girls, frightened, like she once was. Her hand froze. The world around her fell quiet. Kali's voice broke through the silence, sharp and relentless, demanding she'll finish it. "Do it, Jane," she hissed. "Make him pay." 11 looked at the man again, not as a monster, but as a father. The tears came before she could stop them. She released him, her power fading with her resolve. "No," she whispered. "I'm not like you." Kali's eyes burned with betrayal, her illusion breaking like glass. For the first time, 11 saw her sister not as strength, but as pain dressed in armor. The sirens grew louder outside. Rain beat harder against the windows, and as they fled into the night, 11 knew she couldn't stay. The storm had changed her, but not the way Kali hoped. The storm had grown fiercer through the night. The once soft drizzle now pounded like stones against the windows, and flashes of lightning carved breath, white scars across the dark sky. Emma sat by the window, clutching a cup of tea gone cold. She couldn't shake the feeling that something in the rain was calling to her. Every thunderclap seemed to echo her heartbeat, and every gust of wind whispered her name. Outside, the street was empty, but she could see movement, a faint shadow slipping between the trees across the road, moving closer each time she blinked. Her phone buzzed suddenly, startling her. A message flashed across the screen. "Don't look outside." No number, no contact name, just those 3 words. Emma froze. Her pulse thumped in her ears, drowning out the sound of the storm. Slowly, her eyes drifted back toward the window. The glass was fogging up from her breath, but she could still see it, a tall, thin figure standing perfectly still under the streetlight. It wasn't moving anymore. It was waiting. The rain poured harder, washing over its shape, but it didn't blur. It stood there, as if the storm itself avoided touching it. Emma backed away, the wooden floor creaking under her feet. The house, once cozy and familiar, now felt alien and vast. Shadows seemed to stretch too long, corners looked too dark, and the air was heavy, thick with something unseen. She could hear the faint drip of water somewhere behind her. Maybe the roof was leaking, maybe it wasn't. The smell of damp earth filled the room. Another message appeared on her phone. "It's inside." Her throat tightened. Her breath quickened. She didn't dare turn around. She could feel it. Something behind her, close enough to hear her heartbeat. She spun around, but nothing was there. Just the dim outline of furniture and the soft hiss of rain outside. She forced herself to breathe, to calm the panic clawing at her chest. Maybe it's just my mind, she thought. Maybe I'm dreaming. But then, the lights flickered once, twice, and went out completely. In the dark, she could hear footsteps, slow, wet, moving across the living room floor. They weren't hers. Each step echoed with a faint squelch, as though someone had walked straight out of the storm and into her home. Emma tried to move, but her body refused to listen. A faint glow appeared behind her, her phone lighting up again. The same message repeated over and over. It's inside. It's inside. It's inside. The sound of rain and thunder grew distant, replaced by the slow creak of the floorboards. Emma's trembling fingers reached for her phone, but before she could touch it, a cold breath brushed against her ear, and a voice whispered, "You looked." The night was endless. Rain washed the highway clean, streaking the glass with silver tears as 11 walked alone. The city's hum faded behind her, the shouts, the neon, the ghosts. All that remained was the sound of water and her own heartbeat, steady but hollow. Her shoes were soaked, her jacket heavy. She didn't know where she was going, only that she couldn't stay. The darkness around her felt alive, whispering reminders of everything she had seen, everything she had become. Somewhere beyond the horizon was Hawkins, the only place that had ever felt like something close to home. Somewhere, Mike was still waiting. Each mile blurred into the next. She remembered Hopper's voice again, soft but stern. "You're not alone, kid." But he was wrong. The word alone was all she had ever truly known. When she found a payphone, her hands shook as she dialed a number she could barely remember. The static answered first, then a voice, Mike's, faint, sleepy, real. "Hello?" She froze. The tears came quietly, hidden behind the rain. She wanted to speak, to tell him she was alive, but her throat closed. The silence stretched until the line went dead. She placed the receiver back, pressing her forehead against the cold glass of the booth. The storm outside raged on, echoing the one inside her. Hours later, a truck stopped beside her. The driver was old and died and said nothing as she climbed in. They drove in silence, the radio whispering fragments of songs she didn't know. Her reflection in the window looked older, almost like a stranger, the shaved head gone, replaced by wild curls damp from rain. The girl who once broke mirrors with her mind now barely recognized her own face. When the man offered her a sandwich, she mumbled a thank you. For a moment, she imagined Hopper beside her again, telling one of his bad jokes, trying to make her smile. The thought hurt, but it also gave her warmth, something to hold on to. Maybe that's what family was, the ghosts that refused to fade. By dawn, the rain had stopped. The clouds parted enough for the first light to break through, golden and soft. 11 stepped out of the truck and into the woods, miles from town. The air smelled of pine and earth. Each step she took forward brought back memories, the cabin, the pancakes, the quiet hum of Hopper's radio. Her powers pulsed faintly beneath her skin, weak but alive. The closer she got to Hawkins, the stronger the pull became. It wasn't just her mind calling her back. It was something deeper, older, connected to the gate itself. She could feel it breathing beneath the town like a heartbeat underground. When she reached the edge of the forest, she stopped. Below her, Hawkins slept under a blanket of mist. The world looked small again. Ordinary houses, empty roads, a place pretending to be safe. But she knew better now. Evil had roots, and they were still growing somewhere beneath those streets. 11 tightened her jacket, staring toward the horizon where the lab used to hum in the dark. "I'm coming," she whispered. The wind carried her words into the trees, soft and certain. And as she began to walk, lightning flashed far away, a silent warning, or maybe a welcome. Either way, she didn't look back. The voice was soft, almost gentle, to calm for something that shouldn't exist. Emma froze, unable to breathe, her body trembling as if the cold itself had seeped into her bones. For a moment, there was only silence, heavy and suffocating. Then, a faint sound came from the corner of the room, a slow, deliberate breathing that didn't belong to her. The darkness around her seemed thicker now, more alive, pulsing in rhythm with her fear. She stumbled backward, her hand brushing against the table, knocking over the cold cup of tea. It shattered, but even that noise felt swallowed by the shadows. Lightning flashed through the window, lighting the room for a single heartbeat. In that instant, Emma saw a reflection that wasn't hers. Behind her, standing in the hallway, was a figure drenched in rainwater. Its face was pale and smooth, featureless except for two hollow eyes that glowed faintly, like embers dying in the dark. Then the light was gone, and she was blind again, left with the sound of dripping water and the echo of her own ragged breath. She wanted to scream, but her voice refused to leave her throat. All she could manage was a whisper of prayer that vanished into the storm's roar. The footsteps started again, closer, slower, as if whatever was there wanted her to hear every movement. She backed away toward the kitchen, her trembling hands searching for something to defend herself. Her fingers brushed against a knife on the counter. The handle was slick with moisture, but she gripped it tight. "Stay back," she whispered into the dark, though she didn't believe the words would help. The air around her felt wrong, charged with an electric hum that made her skin crawl. Then, without warning, her phone buzzed once more. This time a new message appeared. "Don't turn around again." Emma's breath caught. She stood frozen, the knife shaking in her grip. The floor behind her creaked, a single soft sound that felt impossibly close. The smell of rain and something metallic filled her nose. She wanted to run, to escape, but her body was locked between terror and disbelief. Slowly, against every instinct, she began to turn. Her eyes widened. Nothing was there, only shadows rain against glass, and her reflection trembling in the dark window. But her reflection wasn't copying her movements anymore. It was smiling. Her scream was lost in the thunder. The lights flickered back on, revealing an empty house, silent, untouched, as if nothing had ever happened. The door was still locked. The floor was dry. Her phone lay on the ground, the screen cracked, displaying the final message: "See you when it rains again." The rain hadn't stopped since that night. Days passed, but the sky stayed heavy and gray, as though the storm itself refused to let go. Emma hadn't slept properly. Every time her eyes closed, she heard that same faint whisper, the voice that told her not to turn around. It echoed in her dreams, wrapping around her like cold mist. She moved through her house like a ghost, unplugging her phone, covering mirrors, sealing windows with tape. Yet somehow, when she woke each morning, there were droplets on the inside of the glass. The rain was finding its way in. The storm was remembering her. She tried to convince herself that it had been a hallucination, trauma mixed with exhaustion. But when she checked the messages again, they were still there. Not just the last one, but dozens of new ones she swore hadn't existed before. Each carried the same phrase: "I'm outside," sometimes followed by a time, sometimes followed by her own name. Emma began to notice something even more disturbing. Every time a message arrived, a faint shadow appeared on her porch light camera. The figure was always standing still, drenched, head tilted slightly as if watching. But when she ran to the window, no one was there. By the fourth night, she couldn't take it anymore. The rain was louder than usual, hammering the roof with violent intensity. Lightning flashed again and again, painting the room white for a split second before drowning it in darkness. She gathered her courage, grabbed the same knife she had held that night, and stepped outside. The storm swallowed her instantly. Water soaked her hair, her clothes, her skin cold as ice, sharp as needles. She called out, voice breaking under the sound of thunder. "Who are you?" She shouted into the void. Only the wind answered, carrying her words away into the night. Then she saw it again, the same pale figure at the edge of the streetlight's glow. But now, there were more silhouettes lining the road, standing silently in the rain. Their faces were blank, their heads tilted at the same unnatural angle. Emma's breath came in short, shallow bursts as the shadows began to move. Not fast, not slow, just enough for her to understand they were coming closer. Panic surged through her body, and she turned to run back into the house. But the front door was gone. In its place was a wall of black water, shimmering like glass, reflecting a different world behind it, a mirror version of her home, darker, endless, waiting. She stumbled backward, heart pounding, knife slipping from her hand. The rain was no longer just falling, it was whispering. Each drop carried words she couldn't understand, soft and rhythmic, forming a chant that filled her mind with dread. She pressed her hands to her ears, but it was inside her now, deep and resonant. The shadows stopped, watching, as if waiting for her to make a choice, and then, from within the mirrored water, a pale hand reached out, trembling, delicate, and all too familiar. It was hers. Emma took one step back, then another, until her heel hit the curb. The storm howled louder, almost urging her forward. Her reflection's mouth moved, though no sound came from it. Then she understood. It wasn't calling for help. It was calling her home. For a moment, the rain froze in time. Every droplet hung suspended in midair, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Emma stared at the hand reaching through the wall of water, her own hand pale, trembling, and impossibly real. Behind that mirror-like surface, the world seemed to pulse, shifting in rhythm with her heartbeat. It wasn't just reflection anymore. It was invitation. The air around her hummed softly, a deep, low vibration that made the ground tremble beneath her feet. She wanted to scream, to run, to wake up, but her body refused to obey. The rain started again, slower now, almost gentle, each drop striking her skin like a countdown she couldn't stop. She took a hesitant step forward. The figures behind her didn't move. They stood in silence, as if witnessing a ceremony. The reflected Emma smiled, a small fragile thing that never reached her eyes. It looked like her, but older, worn eyes, hollow as if they'd been watching through the storm for a long, long time. When the reflection spoke, the sound came from everywhere, from the rain, the thunder, the walls of her house. "You let it in," it whispered. "Now it remembers your name." Emma's heart pounded. "What are you?" she demanded, voice cracking. "What do you want from me?" The reflection's smile widened, and the lights from the street began to flicker in rhythm with her words. "I am what you left behind in the dark," it said softly, "and I want you to come back." The rain rose around her ankles now, pooling unnaturally fast. The water was warm, too warm, as if something beneath the surface was alive, breathing. She looked around in desperation, but her house was gone. The street was gone. There was only endless water stretching into a gray horizon where the sky bled into the ground. The whispers grew louder, echoing in a dozen voices that all sounded like hers. Each drop, each ripple, repeated the same message: "Remember me." Emma stumbled forward, falling to her knees as her reflection reached out again. For one heartbeat, she saw the world behind that glass, a place made entirely of storms. Buildings stood like skeletons. People walked with their heads tilted, faces blank and dripping, forever repeating the motions of a life long forgotten. Lightning split the sky, and in that flash, Emma saw hundreds of reflections, not just hers, but every face that had ever disappeared into the rain. They stared back at her, motionless, as though waiting for her to take her place among them. She tried to crawl backward, but the water clung to her like hands, pulling her down. The reflection's eyes turned completely black. "There's no going back once the storm knows you," it whispered. "You looked too long," Emma gasped, struggling to breathe. The world above fading as the sound of thunder became a distant, muffled echo. When the rain finally stopped, the street was empty again. The sky cleared to a dull gray, calm and still. Her house stood quiet, lights flickering faintly inside. The phone on the table buzzed once. A single notification blinked on the screen. New message: "I'm home." Outside, the puddles on the road reflected perfectly still images of the clouds. But if anyone looked closely, they might notice something strange. In one of the reflections, a woman stood by the door, smiling softly. She looked just like Emma, but her lips didn't move with the wind. And when the next drop of rain fell, she didn't disappear. The summer of 1986 in the small town of Ravenwood felt endless. The air shimmered with heat. Bicycles raced down cracked pavement, and the smell of cut grass mixed with the hum of distant lawnmowers. Inside his dimly lit bedroom, Leo, 15, sat surrounded by wires, cassette tapes, and an old ham radio that had belonged to his late father. The radio wasn't just a hobby, it was a lifeline, a connection to something beyond the walls of that house, beyond the silence that had followed his father's death. Most nights, Leo tuned into truckers, distant weather stations, or static-laced broadcasts from foreign voices he didn't understand. But that night, something was different. The static felt alive. A faint whisper bled through the speakers, buried deep in the noise. "Do you hear me?" Leo froze. It wasn't a normal transmission. The voice sounded too close, too deliberate, too human. It had the fragile pitch of a young girl, but hollow, like someone speaking from underwater. He leaned closer, turning the dial with trembling fingers. "Who is this?" he asked, half expecting a prank from his friends. Static. Then, a low click, like someone switching channels, and the voice returned, softer this time. "You have to listen. Before she wakes up." A chill rippled up his spine. The signal meter flickered erratically, bouncing between frequencies that shouldn't even exist. Leo pressed the record button on his cassette deck, his pulse hammering. Then, just as suddenly as it had come, the voice was gone. Silence swallowed the room. He replayed the tape, nothing but static. No voice, no distortion. Just the hiss of emptiness. Leo sat back, staring at the glowing red dial. For the first time, the familiar comfort of the radio felt wrong, like it was watching him. The next morning, he met Clara, his best friend since childhood, outside the corner store. Clara was all sarcasm and sharp eyes, her backpack covered in pins from bands she didn't actually like. When Leo told her about the voice, she laughed, sipping her soda. "Maybe you tuned in to Ghostbusters FM," she joked. "I'm serious," he insisted. "It said something about waking up, and it knew I was there." Clara shrugged. "Then record it again tonight. If it's real, it'll come back." Her teasing grin didn't calm him, because when Leo rewound the tape again later that day, the static wasn't just random anymore. There was a faint rhythm buried inside it, a pattern. 3 short bursts, 2 long, 3 short again, almost like a heartbeat. That night, Leo returned to his desk with the lights off and his window open. The cicadas outside screamed in the heavy summer air. He turned the radio knob slowly, tracing the same frequency range as before. At first, nothing but the usual white noise. Then, the faint echo of something mechanical, a tone, rising and falling, like a breathing machine. Leo's hand hovered over the recorder. "Do you hear me?" he whispered into the mic. The reply came instantly this time. "Yes." The word was drawn out, distorted, almost mechanical. Then came another sentence, sharper, almost pleading. "Don't let her find you." Leo's breath caught. "Who are you talking about?" But before the voice could answer, the power flickered. The radio hissed, the lights blinked off, and for a split second, Leo saw a figure reflected in the glass of the window. Not outside. Behind him. He spun around, but the room was empty. Only the faint glow of the radio illuminated his desk. The static was back to normal, indifferent, endless. Leo sat there, heart pounding, as the hum of electricity filled the silence. He could still hear the faint echo of that last word. He reached out to turn off the radio. But before his hand touched the dial, a small red light blinked on by itself. A new transmission started, but this time, it wasn't coming to him. The display showed an outgoing signal. His own radio was transmitting, and from the speaker, in his own voice, came the words, "She's already awake." The following days bled together in a haze of heat and unease. Ravenwood was quiet, too quiet. Even the usual hum of lawnmowers and barking dogs seemed muted, as if the whole town was holding its breath. Leo tried to ignore the voice, but the silence of his room kept dragging him back to the radio. He replayed the tape over and over, convinced that somewhere inside the static there was a pattern, something coded, something intentional. By the 3rd day he noticed it. The rhythm wasn't random. It repeated every 23 seconds, perfectly. And each time it played, the lights in his room flickered. Not once, not twice, 3 times. He wrote it all down in his notebook, marking each flicker with a shaky hand. 3 lights, 23 seconds, every hour. It couldn't be a coincidence. The transmission wasn't just reaching him, it was syncing with something electrical, something alive. That night, Leo went to Clara's house with his cassette player. She rolled her eyes but followed him into the garage, where they plugged the radio into a larger speaker. The air was hot and heavy, the fluorescent bulb above them buzzing faintly. Leo hit play. Static filled the room like a cloud of invisible dust. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the flicker. The light above them blinked 3 times. Clara froze, her smirk fading. Okay, that's creepy, she admitted. Leo nodded, swallowing hard. Told you, but it wasn't just the flickering light that frightened them. Beneath the static, something new began to emerge. A low hum, like machinery deep underground. The sound pulsed, rhythmic, mechanical, almost biological. Leo turned the dial, and the hum grew louder, vibrating through the concrete floor of the garage. Clara stumbled back. Turn it off, Leo, seriously. But Leo couldn't. His eyes were fixed on the red needle bouncing on the dial. The hum shifted, became voices. Dozens of them, whispering at once, overlapping like a chorus of distorted recordings. Help, trapped, listen, wake her. Clara slapped the power switch, plunging the room into silence. The 2 of them stood there, breathing hard. The bulb overhead glowed faintly before popping with a sharp snap. Glass sprinkled the floor like rain. The next morning, the radio station tower on the outskirts of Ravenwood collapsed. The news said it was a lightning strike, but there hadn't been a storm in weeks. A worker at the local power plant was found unconscious near the control panel, muttering the same phrase over and over. She's awake now. No one in town knew what it meant, but Leo did. It was the same thing the voice had said through his radio. He didn't tell Clara, but she noticed the change in him. The hollow eyes, the sleeplessness, the way he jumped at every noise. When she pressed him, he finally confessed. It's not just a signal, he whispered. It's coming from somewhere under the town, and it's getting closer. They decided to investigate that night. Armed with flashlights, they followed the old drainage, tunnels that ran beneath the neighborhood, a maze of concrete and shadows that smelled of rust and mold. Leo carried the radio, its small red light blinking like a heartbeat in the dark. At first, only silence. Then, faintly, the hum returned. It echoed through the tunnels, bouncing off the wet walls. They followed it to a section where the concrete was cracked, the rebar exposed like veins. The signal peaked there, screaming through the speaker. Leo crouched, brushing dirt aside, and saw a symbol carved into the floor. A circle with 3 jagged lines crossing through it. Clara whispered, "What the hell is that?" Leo didn't answer. The radio was shaking in his hands, the static rising into a shrill frequency that made his ears ring. Then the voice, not the girl's this time, a deeper one. "You shouldn't have followed it." They bolted. The sound of their footsteps echoed like thunder through the tunnels, chased by that mechanical hum. When they burst back into the open air, the sky above Ravenwood was flickering, not lightning, but power surges across the entire grid. Streetlights blinked 3 times, perfectly synchronized. Leo stared, realizing it wasn't just his radio anymore. Whatever was coming through the frequency was spreading, using every electrical line, every circuit, every signal. It was already in the town's veins. For 2 days, Ravenwood trembled under strange electrical surges. Power flickered across entire blocks, clocks reset themselves, and phones rang with no one on the other end. The local radio stations were the first to go silent. Every channel, no matter the frequency, emitted the same background hum, a slow mechanical breathing, pulsing exactly every 23 seconds. Leo barely left his room. He'd set up the ham radio again, unable to resist. Clara had begged him to stop, to throw it away, but he couldn't. It wasn't curiosity anymore. It was compulsion, like something was whispering just below his thoughts, pushing him to keep listening. The whispers had changed. They no longer sounded like random static. They had rhythm, direction, intention. Late that night, Leo sat alone, eyes fixed on the red glow of the frequency meter. The air was heavy, humming with invisible tension. And then, at exactly midnight, the transmission returned. Leo, his own name, whispered in the same tone the girl's voice had used. "Who are you?" he whispered back. Static answered first, then another voice deeper, colder. impossible to place. You opened the way. Leo's throat tightened. The dials spun by themselves, clicking between frequencies faster than he could follow. The lights flickered 3 times, and the air temperature dropped so sharply his breath turned visible. "We hear you now," the voice said. He slammed the power switch off, but even with the radio dead, he could still hear the voice faint, somewhere behind him, as if the sound had escaped the machine. He didn't sleep that night. The next morning, Clara found him sitting on the curb outside his house, pale, shaking, the radio beside him. He told her what had happened, every detail. She tried to brush it off, but something about the way the air seemed to hum around them made her skin crawl. "We need help," she said. "Maybe your dad's old equipment is doing something weird. Maybe it's broken." But Leo shook his head. "It's not broken. It's listening." He told her about the symbol in the tunnels, the circle with 3 jagged lines. Clara had seen it before too, spray painted on the side of the abandoned substation near the river. It wasn't just graffiti. It had been carved into metal. Someone or something had marked the town long before them. That evening, they biked to the substation, the sun bleeding red behind the rooftops. The chain-link fence was torn open, and the air smelled faintly of ozone and rot. Inside, rows of dead monitors lined the walls, flickering with faint static. The hum was louder here, deep and guttural, vibrating through the floor. Leo turned the radio on again. The signal spiked instantly, and then the screens began to flicker in unison. Faces appeared, human shapes, distorted by static, screaming silently from behind the glass. Clara gasped, stumbling backward. "Leo, turn it off." But Leo was frozen. The whispers poured through the speakers, overlapping, desperate. "Help us. Wake her. She's feeding." Suddenly, the power surged. Every screen burst into blinding white light, and a deafening tone filled the room. Clara yanked the plug from the wall, plunging them into darkness. For a moment, everything was silent. Then the radio clicked back on by itself. The voice that followed wasn't like before. It was layered, hundreds of tones, speaking together as one. "You shouldn't have come here." The walls began to hum, vibrating with impossible force. The symbol, the circle with 3 jagged lines, glowed faintly on the concrete floor beneath their feet. Leo dropped the radio, which sparked violently, the smell of burnt plastic filling the air. The ground split open in a thin, jagged line, light spilling out from below, cold, white, and pulsating. Clara screamed his name as the sound rose higher, shaking the entire building. Leo could feel it, the frequency, not just in his ears, but in his bones. It wasn't sound anymore. It was something alive. They ran, through the broken gate, across the gravel road, until the substation was nothing but a flickering light behind them. But even as they reached the safety of the street, Leo realized something terrible. The radio, the one he'd dropped, was still transmitting. He could hear it faintly, from inside his backpack, though it had never been put there. And the voice now spoke clearly, with terrifying calm. "You can't turn it off, Leo. It's part of you now." The morning after the substation incident, Ravenwood changed. The air carried a low hum that never stopped, faint, but constant, like a hidden generator beneath the town. People started complaining about headaches, flickering lights, dreams filled with static and whispers. Radios turned on in the middle of the night. Televisions glowed with dead channels, showing faint, shifting silhouettes. The town's power grid was shut down, but the lights never went dark. Something else was feeding them now. Leo stayed locked in his room, refusing to answer calls. His notebook filled with sketches of the symbol and endless pages of numbers. He didn't remember writing most of them. Sometimes, when he looked at the handwriting, it didn't even look like his. Clara was the only one who kept visiting. She found him pale, exhausted, surrounded by wires and broken circuits. The radio was back, repaired somehow, though neither of them had touched it. The red light blinked steadily, like a heartbeat. Leo told her the truth he'd been avoiding. "It's not a signal," he said, voice shaking. "It's a door, and every time we listen, it opens a little wider." He pointed to the symbols drawn across his walls. Each one pulsed faintly in the dim light, as if responding to his words. They're using the frequencies, radio waves, electricity, anything with current. They're not from here, Clara. They're underneath everything. The hum is them. She wanted to believe he was losing his mind. But the air itself seemed to vibrate with meaning. Something unseen was listening, watching. That night, Clara woke to the sound of her TV turning on by itself. The screen glowed with static. Through the hiss, she could hear voices, hundreds of them, whispering over one another. Then one rose above the rest, clear and cold. You can't stop the broadcast. She ran to Leo's house, finding the door open, the hall lights flickering in that familiar pattern. 3 flashes. Pause, 3 again. In his room, Leo sat facing the radio, unmoving. The light on the device was glowing white now, brighter than it should have been. Leo, she whispered. He turned slowly toward her. His eyes reflected the same pale light, and when he spoke, his voice echoed, layered, not entirely human. It's almost time, Clara. They're ready. Behind him, the walls began to pulse, every drawn symbol burning red. The radio screamed a piercing, metallic sound that drilled through her skull. Clara fell to her knees, clutching her ears. And then, just as suddenly, silence. When she looked up, Leo was gone. Only the radio remained, still humming. She grabbed it and ran, stumbling out into the street. But Ravenwood wasn't the same anymore. The town was dark, yet alive. Street lights flickered in patterns. Storefront signs buzzed with symbols instead of words, and faint whispers rose from every speaker and wire. In the distance, she saw people standing perfectly still under the glowing lamps, faces turned upward, eyes blank and white. The static filled the night like a storm. Clara pressed the radio to her chest, shaking. "What do you want?" she cried. The answer came from everywhere at once, from the power lines, from the open windows, from the air itself, to be heard. The ground beneath her feet trembled. The street cracked open, light spilling from below, that same cold, mechanical brightness she'd seen in the tunnels. The hum rose into a roar. Clara screamed Leo's name, but her voice was lost in the chaos. Every screen in town lit up, every radio turned on, every wire glowing as something pushed its way through the signal. A shape, faceless and shifting, built of static and light. The entity moved like smoke, like interference, its form fracturing the air. It wasn't stepping into their world, it was rewriting it. Everything that relied on power or sound bent toward it, consumed by the frequency. The next morning, Ravenwood was silent. The power grid was dead. The air no longer hummed. When government agents arrived, they found the town empty, every house abandoned, every piece of technology fried beyond repair. Only one recording was recovered from a radio tower miles away, still transmitting faintly through the static. A female voice, trembling, desperate, repeating the same words over and over. "This is Clara. If anyone can hear me, don't tune in. Don't listen to the hum. It's not noise. It's them." Then silence. And somewhere in that static, if you turn the volume high enough, you can still hear Leo's voice whispering, "She's awake." They say selling a house is selling a dream, but sometimes the dream is already rotten. My name is Henry Tavares, real estate agent, 10 years in the business. I'm good at what I do. I know how to pitch my voice, calibrate my smile, and find that perfect balance between empathy and manipulation. I've sold everything from roach-infested apartments to mansions that still smelled faintly of their dead owners. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the house on 99 Palm Street. The ad looked ordinary enough. Charming old family home, spacious, large backyard, priced below market, too far below, actually. When I asked the office manager why, he only grinned, adjusting his name tag. "Let's just say, it's an opportunity for someone who doesn't believe in stories." He laughed. I didn't. I arrived on a humid afternoon. The place was massive, its tall green shutters the walls peeling like old skin. The trees in the yard leaned toward the house, branches pressing against the windows as if they were trying to look inside. I turned the key. The lock clicked open with a dry snap. Inside, the air was stale, thick and heavy, with a faint scent of mold. And something else, sweet, metallic, too faint to place, but enough to make the back of my throat tighten. The hallway stretched ahead, lined with faded wallpaper. The floor creaked beneath my shoes, and the walls bore lighter rectangles where old paintings had once hung. At the far end, a staircase rose to the second floor. I pulled out my checklist, every room I was supposed to show, every feature to highlight. But before I took a step, I heard it. A soft click, like a door opening. Logic kicked in. Old house, bad hinges, wind maybe. But the wind doesn't whisper your name. Henry. The sound came from upstairs, low, rasped, almost like someone breathing through dust. I swallowed, tightened my grip on the clipboard, and climbed the stairs slowly, each step groaning beneath my weight. At the end of the hallway, one door stood ajar. I pushed it open. The hinges moaned in protest. Inside, nothing. Just a large mirror, framed in tarnished gold. I stepped closer, frowning. The glass shimmered slightly, not with dust, but movement. Then I realized what was wrong. The mirror wasn't showing this room. It was showing the front hall downstairs, the door, the empty corridor. Empty, except for the man standing there. He wore a suit, a dark one, neat tie. His face was too shadowed to see clearly, but I could tell he was staring up, directly toward where I stood. I turned around fast, nothing behind me. When I looked back, the mirror had changed. Now, the front door was closed. The air turned cold enough to sting. I felt something brush my shoulder, firm, human, deliberate. I froze. Slowly, I turned to the mirror again. The man was smiling now, and pinned to his jacket, glinting faintly in the dim light, was a real estate badge. The same company as mine. I didn't tell anyone about what happened with the mirror. Realtors live off their reputations, and nothing kills credibility faster than sounding insane. I convinced myself it was exhaustion. Too much work. Too many late nights juggling contracts and desperate clients. The mind can turn shadows into ghosts when it's hungry for commission. Still, when I returned to the agency the next morning, I couldn't ignore the chill that followed me from that house. The senior agent, Miss Duarte, was waiting at my desk. Her perfume arrived before she did. Heavy, artificial, the kind of scent that hides cigarette smoke and nerves. "Henry," she said, tapping the folder marked Palm Street property. "The boss is impressed. We've got a client interested already." "Really?" I tried to sound enthusiastic, but my stomach twisted. "Of course. I told you good deals don't stay quiet for long. You'll meet him tonight at 7. Same address." "Tonight?" She smiled, all teeth and caffeine. "Don't be late. He's particular." The day dragged. Every phone call sounded distant. Every clock ticked too loud. By evening, I found myself parked outside 99 Palm Street again, watching the last smear of daylight fade behind the trees. The house seemed darker than before, almost alive, like it was waiting for something. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror, straightened my tie, and stepped out. The air felt colder than it should have been for summer. Inside, the silence was deeper, heavier, as though the walls themselves were listening. I turned on my flashlight and walked through the hallway. Everything was exactly as I'd left it, except for one thing. The front door was closed. I was sure I'd left it open last time. "Hello," I called out, voice echoing through the halls. No answer. I tried again, louder this time. "Mr. Silva, are you here?" The beam of the flashlight flickered. For a brief moment, it caught movement, a figure at the end of the hall, tall and still. I blinked, and it was gone. My pulse quickened. "Sir." The light steadied again, revealing the old mirror I'd seen before. It was leaning against the wall now, reflecting only darkness. I took a step closer, and froze. There, behind my reflection, was another shadow, standing perfectly still. "Who's there?" I whispered. A soft voice answered, though I couldn't tell from where. "You're late." The air thickened. My ears rang with pressure, like being underwater. The mirror fogged slightly, as if someone on the other side had exhaled against it. Letters began to appear, traced by an invisible finger. "Welcome back, agent." My breath caught. The voice spoke again, softer now, closer. "We've been waiting for you to sell it." Again. I stumbled backward, knocking over a dusty chair. The flashlight hit the floor, its beam rolling across the walls, and for a split second, I saw them. Dozens of pale faces, faint and translucent, pressed against the wallpaper from inside, their mouths open in silent screams. Then, darkness. I woke up in my car with the engine running. The sky was pale gray, the kind of dawn that feels more like an autopsy than a sunrise. My hands were trembling on the steering wheel. I didn't remember leaving the house, or even running. Just the mirror, the faces, and that voice calling me agent, as if it knew me long before I'd ever stepped inside. The air smelled faintly of metal and damp soil. I checked my watch. 6:13 a.m. I'd lost almost 11 hours. Back at the agency, Ms. Duarte didn't even seem surprised to see me. "You look terrible," she said with a smirk, flipping through property listings. "Rough night." I hesitated. The client never showed up. She looked up then, really looked. For a moment, her eyes flickered with something unreadable. "Did he?" she asked quietly. Then she smiled again, businesslike. "No matter, we'll find another. That house always finds someone." "What do you mean?" Her nails tapped rhythmically on the desk, 3 sharp clicks like the ticking of a clock. "Every few years, someone new takes over the Palm Street listing. Always volunteers, even if they don't remember doing it." "I didn't volunteer." "You did," she said. "You signed the transfer form last night." My throat went dry. She handed me a sheet of paper. My signature was there, looping, confident, unmistakably mine. But the date was wrong. It was dated 3 years earlier. "I never—" "You did," she interrupted, tone firm. "And you'll do it again. It's tradition. Henry Silva and Sons keeps its properties moving. Always moving." That phrase clung to me like a curse. Always moving. I left the office in a fog, the sound of her clicking nails echoing in my skull. When I reached the car, the back seat was wet rainwater. I thought until I noticed the muddy footprints on the floor mats. Bare feet, small. I drove back to 99 Palm Street before I could talk myself out of it. The sun was low and orange, casting long shadows that seemed too sharp, too solid. The house waited, silent, timeless. I stepped inside. The smell of metal was stronger now, and the faint sound of whispers rippled through the halls. The kind of noise that exists just below human hearing, where language begins to dissolve. In the living room, the for sale sign lay on the floor, warped and cracked. Beneath it, something new had been nailed into the wall. A photograph. Black and white. It showed a man standing in front of the house, shaking hands with a smiling woman, the same woman from the agency. Her name tag was visible, Duarte Senior Agent. And the man beside her, he was me. Same suit, same smile, same badge. The photo was dated November 7th, 1975. My breath hitched. 50 years, impossible. Yet there I was, my face, my hand, my signature on the deed framed beneath it. From upstairs, the voice came again, calm and patient. "The house always keeps its agents. Henry, you just forgot your last showing." The lights flickered once, twice, 3 times, and the mirror in the hall began to glow. The light from the mirror pulsed like a heartbeat, soft at first, then faster, brighter. I should have run, but curiosity has always been the first sin of my profession. Realtors sell illusions, and I had to know what kind of illusion this house was selling. I stepped closer. The surface rippled, glass turning liquid. My reflection blurred, and in its place, a familiar image emerged. The front door of 99 Palm Street. It was opening. Through that door walked a man, neat hair, polished shoes, clipboard in hand. Me, I was watching myself enter. The same movements, the same nervous glance toward the stairs. I shouted, but my voice didn't echo. The other me couldn't hear. He walked through the same corridor, checked the same rooms, and paused before the same mirror. Then, just before he reached out to touch it, something shifted behind him. A figure in a suit, pale and smiling, appeared in the doorway. My skin crawled. I knew that face. It was me again, older this time, eyes hollow, grin fixed and lifeless. The scene froze. The mirror flashed once, and suddenly I was standing in the doorway, watching both versions of myself, one alive, one not. The older me turned, his movements slow, deliberate, mechanical. He spoke, and the sound came from inside my head. Every house needs an agent. I stumbled back. What are you? He smiled wider, skin cracking like dry paint. I'm what you'll become when you stop selling dreams and start selling walls. The house groaned around us, timbers creaking, air humming. From beneath the floorboards, whispers rose, dozens, hundreds of them, all chanting the same phrase. Always moving, always selling. The mirror fractured, not breaking but splitting open like an eyelid. Beyond the glass, I saw countless rooms, each one identical to this one, each with a mirror, and in every mirror, a realtor standing alone, smiling, waiting. I turned to run, but the door had vanished, only smooth wall. The whispers grew louder, a chorus of desperate gratitude and madness. Hands began to press out from inside the wallpaper, pale, translucent, clawing for release. My reflection stepped forward, extending its hand. It's your turn, Henry, it said gently, like a friend. The next showing is about to begin. I screamed, but no sound came. The walls surged forward, swallowing the room in white light. When I opened my eyes, everything was calm. Daylight streamed through clean windows. The smell of fresh paint hung in the air. The mirror stood pristine, reflecting a well-dressed man adjusting his tie. But I didn't feel like Henry anymore. I felt rehearsed, programmed. I picked up my clipboard, smiled at the empty hall, and heard footsteps outside. A knock on the door. I opened it. A young woman stood there, bright-eyed, nervous, wearing a crisp blazer with the company badge pinned neatly to her chest. "Hi," she said cheerfully. "I'm the new agent. Ms. Duarte sent me." I smiled wider, the way I always do. "Of course," I said softly. "Welcome to Silva and Sons. Let me show you around." The door closed behind us, and somewhere in the walls, faint but constant, the house began to hum again.